outcomes of each team, the crop modeling, livestock modeling, trade modeling. And the first one to speak will be Frank Ebert, the coordinator, the co-coordinator, and the final quarter for the crop modeling.
Good morning, everybody. First, I'd like to welcome you also on behalf of our crop M people. And I'm afraid I will annoy the camera people by walking around here. Give them a bit of a hard time. This presentation is prepared together with Heino Rötter, with whom I'm coordinating together the crop M team, and with contributions from the work package leaders, but also with contributions from all crop M people. Not all of them are here presently, and this is simply because we didn't want to overwhelm the other teams by our large number of partners. It's not really the reason. The real reason is, I guess, we are quite diverse. We are diverse in respect of the focus that people have. Some people are very dedicated on crop modeling. Others are more involved in the integration of crop models with other models. And I guess this second part of the people is more present at this conference. We had 2 months ago, we had a conference in Oslo, crop M theme, where we would show the whole breadth of our work. This conference is mainly represented by the people that are more involved in the integrated assessment. In the first slides, I will take you back a few years when we started to design the proposal for crop M. Just some background information why we did this, why we found it so exciting and interesting to work on this topic. And the work in macsur is very much driven by the demand that we saw in those days. Demand for crop modeling to better understand crop growth and yield in the context of climate change, to improve food security, and to support policy and decision making. We saw that we have some good experience, of course. We saw that crop modeling can contribute to that, and we also saw some limitations, and for that reason we were very keen on using the opportunity that macsur offered to advance our work in that context. Particularly, also within the context of macsur, is the contribution of crop modeling to impact assessment. And there's also a demand, of course, for this to improve crop modeling in the context of impact assessment, to reduce risk for production, to identify adaptation mitigation options, to allow integrated assessment, really in the context of integration, developing the keynote presentation, the legal economic models and biophysical models, and to allow a multi-scale assessment, and the aspect of scale was also mentioned in the keynote this morning, not only addressing problems at a specific and single level of organization, but try to integrate across the levels of organization. Now, we identified different issues where we thought 2 years ago crop modeling would fall a bit short. And the key issues are listed here on this slide. We, in those days, thought we could still learn something from model intercomparison, and we had this little exchange in response of the keynote, how many models do we need? This is actually one exercise that gives us more insight into this question. Another issue of concern is experimental data. We can use lots of simulations, but we always need good experimental data to move ahead and to improve our models. Methods of scaling, methods and methodologies for uncertainty analysis are two other big issues that we identified. We also found it important to build research capacity and to develop climate scenarios for our crop models. Now, these issues pretty much have also structured the crop M treatment. Later in the presentation, I will run through the different work packages that we have identified to show you some of the progress that we have made in the last 1.5 years. Very early when we started crop M, we thought it is very important for us to also perform that work and to contribute to the scientific excellence in that field. We just didn't want to repeat things that have been done or are being done elsewhere. We thought it is very important for us to be scientific excellent on some aspects of the issues that I just identified. And we phrase these items that you see on this slide. We really want to develop, in the course of that macsur program, develop a method for a European comprehensive impact assessment of climate change and policy on European crop production and food security. This is quite ambitious, but we have a great group of people together, and we have made some good progress in the first 1.5 years. So we're quite positive in achieving at least a substantial part of that ambition. And more specifically, we wanted these assessments to be developed in the context of particularly advancing the ability of our crop models to simulate responses of crops to climate change for a broader range. Full ranges in brackets, we may not achieve really the full range of 100 or 120 crops, but a broader range of crops we want to include, and that's also very important, crop rotations, advanced area methods, state-of-the-art scenario construction, and novel impact assessment, novel impact uncertainty assessment, and reporting. And also important for us, and here comes the integration part, to again advance the link to farm and sector models. And last but not least, to train what we call the so-called integrated crop model. That's a species of scientists that do not really have. We have been very active in the first 1.5 years and engaged in several ongoing activities, and this is a short list of conferences and workshops where we have contributed. We have closely into the ACME program, and you have heard the keynote of the welcome address by Cynthia Rosenzweig. So we're closely related to ACME. We participated in several global workshops in Rome and New York. We participated in the Climate Smart Agriculture Conference and in the Impacts World Conference in Potsdam, as well as the first international conference on global food security. And we had our first international crop and symposium and workshop in Oslo just months ago. Presently, we are here at this meeting currently. We have a few other meetings coming in the next couple of years. This is the ACME Week Symposium, again the link to ACME in Clermont-Ferrand, later this spring. The 5th annual ACME Global Workshop, and the conference that is particularly with breeding of crops that are coping with climate change in the UK. And in 2015 there will be a farming systems design symposium where we also involved in the organization of that event. With respect to the orientation of this meeting, we are also quite busy on preparing our models for the integrating them with economic models, with farm-level models. We have several pilot studies for this, and we are also engaging in the ongoing 3 pilot studies of which you will hear later on in the course of the conference, that are taking place in Finland, and also in Austria, and in Italy. As a result of this interaction, of really being more practical in terms of applying our crop models for integrated assessment, we have reviewed the present capability of our crop models again. So this is 1.5 years later, and we've tried to also make a qualitative assessment of where we are with respect to the capability of our crop models and what is needed. So the whole full bar is always the 100% fulfillment of the demand posed on us crop modelers, and the filled part of the bar is where we are present. So you can see that when it comes to the responsiveness to simulating responsiveness to climate change of crops, but we have quite some work to do with respect to other items, uncertainty, including of management activities, the integration into integrated assessment, still of the demand, and also the number of crops that we are able to simulate climate change effects for. I'm now coming to a part of the presentation where I want to become a bit more specific in presenting some of the results that have been achieved so far in the different work packages. And the structure of the work packages are already indicated. In the first work package, we are particularly interested in model intercomparison and improvement. And I'm not reading all the objectives here in detail, just pointing to some aspects what this work package tries to address. It's the identification of major cropping systems, just as an overview of which cropping system play a role. There's quite some work ongoing in getting this overview for Europe together. And then to develop a common protocol for model intercomparison. This is quite important. We have a standardized protocol that we can use within the context of this program, but also in other programs. This is also pretty much done in conjunction with ACNIP. Requirements for the classification of data, experimental data, and then to perform actually the model intercomparison and identify the gaps in the models, then come to this step of improving the model. Now this is the most recent example of where we compare running models for single crops. These are these triangles as compared to crop rotation, and these are the circles. Just want to draw your attention to these few symbols here. Simulations for different crops: barley, maize, peanuts, potato, rye, sugar beet, wheat, as compared to single crops, as compared to crop rotation. And you can nicely see that if we run the models in crop rotation, they give first different results as compared to running the model for single crop. That's what was presently done. And usually the root mean square errors, that's the difference between the simulation, the simulated and the observed data, becomes smaller when we run on the crop rotation. So we're obviously doing a better job. I'm not saying more about this. There's a presentation on this tomorrow as part of this conference where you can hear more about this activity. Now, the outputs that we have achieved so far are summarized in this table. And again, I will not have the time to run through all these outputs. There are several papers planned. Some are in preparation, some are in submission. This is the activity I just referred to. And you can, these presentations will be made available for those that are interested. They can inform themselves about the details of the progress that we have made in this work package. Moving on to the next work package 2 on data management. And in this work package, as the name already said, we are very interested in getting good experimental data together and also developing protocols of using this data and protocols of performing experiments so that they become useful for crop modeling. This is also very important once experiments are set up, performed, that people know which data to take, how to take the data, so that we can make use of this data. And we will develop protocols. We are developing protocols for this. But we also develop a web-based interface for data exchange, a procedure for visualization of model inputs and outputs. And this work package not only deals with the collection of data and the development of protocols, but it also analyzes data. So it does perform statistical analysis of data. And as a placeholder for this activity, I've included the work that has been done prior to macsur, because the ongoing work is just about to be published, so we can't really show it here. So this is an example of a prior study that just gives an indication of information these data analysis can provide in the context of climate change. Here we look at the occurrence of different development stages: harvest, yellow ripeness, heading, emergence, over a period of 50 years, and this is in Germany, observed together with climate data on 6,000 stations across the country. And this is the aggregate response of the occurrence of these stages. And you see that in the course of the time, these stages have occurred earlier. And if we look at the stage yellow ripeness, it has occurred 17 days earlier over a period of 15 years. And the phase from sowing to yellow ripe has declined by 2 weeks. Now, those sort of signals are quite interesting for us when it comes to model evaluation and also to the improvement of our models. Again, we have a whole list of accomplishments that have been achieved in the first 1.5 years. I want to draw your attention to perhaps these two items here below. There is a data collection effort and analysis ongoing with respect to odd-seed rate, to do first this type of analysis I've just shown you, but then not only for phenological stages, but also for yield. And there's a paper about to be published in Nature Climate Change on the analysis of extremes for wheat and euro. But here, the emphasis is not only to look at a single risk, from heat stress, for instance, but to look at multiple risks. Heat stress, drought stress, and perhaps other risks. And this will come out in the next weeks, I suppose. I will move on to the next work package 3. This is mainly on the methods of scaling and modeling. And I've summarized this briefly here and the objectives in three items to provide an overview of scaling methods, to evaluate scaling methods, and to also advance with respect to the approaches for modeling and assessment. I just got an indication that I have 2 minutes left. Okay. This is always the point where I say, well, because problem is so big, we should get a few more minutes. We will see. Anyway, this is an example of a study that we are presently performing. We call this the scaling exercise. We perform this in North Rhine-Westphalia. It's the state of Germany, and it has quite a nice heterogeneous environmental conditions. And here we are interested to understand how important is the aggregation. It comes back to the scaling points that were made in the keynote. How important is it? How much error do we make if we make mistakes there? But from a very high resolution, it's almost individual fields, not quite, to a more aggregated form of simulation and data input provision. This is almost the aggregation that is taken by the economic models. If we link the crop model to the economic model here, this very coarse aggregation. We want to understand what's the impact of this aggregation on yield simulation. And I can also refer to the session in the course of that conference where more details are presented of this scaling exercise with respect to the effects on crop yields. And here we're not only looking at the effects of aggregation on crop yields, but also on the effects on other output variables with respect to the water cycle, with respect to soil organic carbon, with respect to the nitrogen dynamics. So we want to see that if we make an error with respect to aggregation, is the error the same for yield as compared to other output variables? And you see the names of people that are responsible for this. And there will be a set of papers coming out of this work as well. Next work package is on scenario development and uncertainty analysis. And here the emphasis is very much on developing methodologies and protocols for uncertainty analysis, for standardized model evaluation, and very important also to develop a methodology for probabilistic assessment of climate change impacts using impact response services. And using this approach to also come to a probabilistic evaluation of alternative adaptation options. So the emphasis here is not so much anymore on deterministic modeling, but on probabilistic modeling. And there's an example, it's an ongoing study where these probabilistic assessment or these impact response services are generated for 3 locations in Europe. And a number of models have been used in this study. This is just one example of one model where you see such an impact response surface for yield, and the isolines represent different yields in response to changes in precipitation and changes in temperature away from the present situation, which is 0. How would these isolines change if you increase temperature and change precipitation? And these responses look quite interesting, and they're quite different between models. And that's interesting for us, of course, to understand what that is. A number of activities ongoing. These I have already mentioned, the impact response services for the impacts, but then also for the adaptation. And this work package also delivers, that's important for the whole problem and also for the whole macsur scenarios, climate change scenarios that are important to run our crop models, these CMP5 based scenarios. I'm almost through work package 5, very much concerned with capacity building, has been quite active in organizing PhD schools, courses, one course in marketing, one course in Aarhus, another one is planned this year in München, and there will be 2 more, one most likely in Wageningen and Florence again, and there's planned for another one. There's also the intention to provide online courses to support student exchange, but the key activity refers so far with respect to the organization of these summer schools, these graduate schools. We can skip this and come to the last work package. And this work package probably has the closest thing to this midterm conference, the aim of the midterm conference, to develop case and integrated pilot studies on impact assessment to link to the decision-making of the agri-food chain. Now, there's a set of objectives dedicated to this overall aim, and some of these activities you will find back in the course of the conference. And I want to perhaps point to some of the specific case studies that are also part of this conference, related to a study that is being performed in Sardinia, and another one, or another activity that is called the stakeholder learning session. There's also a specific session dedicated to this activity in the course of the conference that is being organized with the contribution of PROPNET. And with this, I'm really through. Thank you for your patience and for your attention. Thank you.
Are there any questions, especially from the stakeholders? That keeps us really on schedule, and I invite Richard Kipling to come up and present the progress in live class.
Hey, thanks very much. Just going to give you an overview of progress in LiveAm. Just to give you an idea of where I'm going. I'm going to start by looking at what we're trying to achieve in LiveAm. Go on to talk about what you'll see from LiveAm presentations and contributions this week. The challenges that we face and the opportunities we have, and then to look to the future, 2015, 2017. And plans for later this year also. So I think the first thing to think about, and it's been kind of touched upon by the speakers already this morning, is what we're actually trying to do in macsur. What are the basics of what we're trying to achieve? And we can see this idea of increasing impact going down the side of the slide here. And the first big important step is that linking up between experimental research and modelers to increase the impact of experimental research, and also obviously real life data is what makes models accurate and useful. And there's that feedback as well from models which are identifying the priorities for further research. And then that second stage up, making models relevant to stakeholders and to policymakers, both in terms of scaling and in terms of the subjects they're looking at, and that feedback loop then from those stakeholders to both experimental research and models to say what do we need to know, what format do we need it in, how can models help us to understand the decisions we have to make. And of course, what really makes everything worthwhile, the point of everything, is the application in the real world. This is a pastoral landscape near Chatsworth House in the Peak District. And it's kind of an example of how livestock agriculture is maintaining both a landscape and and providing food in a sustainable manner. And that's basically what we have to achieve. And it's really important that we maintain that focus in our work. So an overview of LiveN. We start with the coordination module, and then we're working right across from data collection and animal scale models in work package 1. Work package 2, grassland modelling, led by Gianni Bellocci. Work package 3, then building up to farm scale, and then on to the regional scale. So you can already see there's quite a lot of diversity in LiveN, and you can see how the different work packages link with that previous slide in terms of linking experimental researchers up to modellers at the various different scales, and then up to the regional level, where we're looking then to be producing policy relevant outputs. So what you're going to see this week? Well, we've got a whole range of different approaches, different subject areas, and different institutes represented. And these go from Dave Bartley at Moradin, talking about that link between experimental research and modelling in terms of livestock disease, plotting its spread, and the changes in that with climate change. We have a completely different aspect, the carbon sequestration in grasslands, and I'll be talking about the availability of carbon sequestration data for modellers. And we'll have Suzanne Belinsky and her colleagues from Potsdam actually talking about their modelling efforts in terms of looking at carbon sequestration under different management strategies. So an entirely different side of things, Nicola Lassetzer at University of Tushia will be talking about the effects of temperature humidity index on dairy cattle productivity and mortality, which links us into this idea of animal health and its impacts on greenhouse gas emissions. And also Sarah Oskam and her colleagues at the Norwegian University of Life Sciences will be telling us about, again, animal health and the impacts of animal health through productivity on greenhouse gas emissions. So I think you can see already the wide range that LiveN encompasses. And it's kind of drawing on what Yuko was saying in the opening presentation today, of that kind of balance between multidisciplinary approaches and very focused but heavy on assumptions approaches. And I think LiveN is certainly looking at that realistic, broad approach, which is both a challenge and opens up a lot of possibilities. Second sort of level of talks and input for the week. Grassland modelling, Julian Minay and colleagues at the University of Liège, and Gianni Bellocci and his colleagues at INRA will be telling us about the strides forward that have been made in the grassland model against comparisons, both in uncalibrated runs and in producing protocols for model evaluation. And Gianni was talking earlier in the year to a workshop in Paris about the activities in macsur and actually leading the way there with planned activities in AGNIP and other international initiatives. We'll have inputs from Wageningen, Agnes van den Hol, and colleagues telling us about the dairy-wise model. And that's very much one of these farm scale models of which Nick at our house will be giving us an overview of their development and comparison exercises. And I think what those farm scale models show is the complexity of livestock systems modelling. So we have the primary production of crop systems. That's just one input to livestock farm scale modelling. So we're facing big challenges. And lastly, but not leastly, we'll hear from regional scale models in the livestock and related sectors from Daniel Sanders and Eric Audsley over at Cranfield, who's Clemson models and projects, look at how profitability of different types of land use are actually likely to drive land use change on a regional scale with climate change. And from the Institute for Applied Systems Analysis, we're going to hear how animal feed supply might change going forward with climate change. And that's certainly a subject that we're hoping to build on in the next phase of macsur. What have we been doing at coordination level? Well, this is an exciting little chart of a research network. And this is actually FP7 projects and the institutional partners in those projects. And it's showing how projects link together different institutes in livestock-related research. This is a kind of preliminary play around with a bit of social science software found on my colleague, Ali Saitman. And what we hope to do is to use this method to actually explore the livestock research community, the livestock research modelling community, to look how it's structured and to look how the knowledge of ideas behind macsur can help to bring that structure together to make it more coherent and also to get that sharing of ideas between projects. And obviously that's one of the big aims from the knowledge hub concept. The future for LiveM, well, where are we? As I've already said, we've got plenty of inputs today and this week that are going to show you how livestock modellers, experimental researchers in the livestock sector, in the grassland sector, have been working towards helping us to answer those questions about food security and about sustainability. And you can't have one without the other. What I think we would like to focus on even more in the second stage, and it's something we've obviously heard from Martin earlier on in the day, at the sort of the education, knowledge exchange side of things. Because one way that we can move forward as a modelling community is to develop the adaptive nature of our modellers, to get a new generation of modellers that is able to work across disciplines on different types of model and get that kind of collaborative approach that Uwe was talking about previously. And that's something we want to build up in a big way in LiveM, based on our diversity of approaches represented in the theme. And this building networks. Obviously the Knowledge Hub in itself is a wide, interesting network, the range of institutions I've shown you before, the range of people represented here. And we want to go beyond that. Again, Martin and Frank have talked about the links with AGNIT that have been forming. I've also been talking to the GRA livestock group about linking up with their work on animal health and greenhouse gas emissions. So those networks, and moving beyond the networks we already have, to bring in more marginal institutions, to bring in certainly younger researchers and earlier career researchers, not necessarily younger, at postdoc level, who are going to benefit most from this sharing of networks, this building of collaborations. And that's another focus we want to have for the future. So what's coming up? Well, we've got our International Livestock Modelling and Research Colloquium in Bilbao in mid-October. It would be great if we could have lots of you along to that. That's being set up for us by the Basque Centre for Climate Change over in Bilbao. And we hope to use that as a forum both to discuss our next steps, to present more of our work, and also to, again, explore that idea of how we get the livestock and grassland modelling community working more cohesively together, working with other organisations such as AGNIT and GRA in building those relationships, and really importantly, building even further our links with the other themes of CropM and TradeM. And hopefully this week will be the basis for that and the new structure of the project going forward, which I'm sure Martin has already talked about, that idea of the cross-cutting themes and getting those cross-cutting activities really building up and increasing those number of pilots. So the website for that conference should be up by the 15th of May for you to have a look at, and you can contact me if you want any more information. So just to conclude, the diversity in LiveM has been a challenge for us, but it's also a big opportunity. And I think what I've certainly learned over the last few months is that what we're trying to do in LiveM is also just starting to happen in AGNIT, in GRA. Their livestock groups, their livestock modelling groups, are only just getting together as well. So we're at an ideal point to have a real input to that global effort and to actually make a real difference and have a say in directing where the subject area goes. And I think what will be shown by our presentations and input this week is that we have already a solid basis for that progress. So just a few acknowledgements, obviously to the rest of the coordination team, Agnes and Palmer at Wageningen, and to our British sponsors, the BBSRC. Thank you very much.
Okay, the floor is open. The floor is open for questions.
Richard, is just specification.
Yes.
You did mention it, that we focus a lot on the grassland-based livestock systems. I'm just asking, what about the rest of the livestock production in Europe and the impact and the adaptation to climate change? Is that covered by the consortium?
Yes, it is, and it's something we want to build on. Obviously, the way that different productivity systems, animal production systems work is really important. We're focusing on dairy, but obviously there's more intensive and more extensive systems. And we need to look at both and look at how the different systems are likely to be affected by climate change in terms of adaptation and mitigation. Obviously, one way we can do that is to look, for example, at animal feed, concentrate feed. Where is it coming from? How is it being supplied? How will that supply be affected by climate change? What's going to happen to not just crop quantity but crop quality? And that's something we can kind of work with Crop M on. Have we got the models that can we build that capability to look at quality issues as well as quantity? Because obviously for livestock systems, the feed that's going into the animal is one of the most important aspects, even more so in intensive systems where that feed might be coming from outside the European Union and maybe soy from South America. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay, thank you. If I invite Floor Brothers to present the progress in trade.
Come here. Thank you much. Good morning. Together with Frans Sinewel, who's sitting over there, we prepared this presentation, and we prepared it together with the other work package leaders. And it's a pleasure to introduce the achievements in trade and during the first year and a half. And I think the introduction made by Uwe this morning was very helpful to support the work in trade and the broader work in macsur. because we start very much in collecting the whole spectrum of available models, be it either in the animal sector, be it in the crop sector, be it in the economic and trade sector. And in the economic and trade part, there is an inventory of approximately 20 to 25 models that are available in the teams that participate in this part of macsur. Many of them cover the farm representation, the farm activities. Several of them targeted more on the regional or national level. A few are European, and some are having a global perspective. And I think the unique effort in macsur is that this broad spectrum of models allow for comparison. This is already an achievement that was hardly done in the past, not in the economic model. There have been a few attempts to compare economic models, but this has far broader perspective linking up to the environment and climate change. And I think this comparison is a first attempt to improve models. And I think macsur is a great attempt to improve models by using common scenarios. And here we benefit very much from the work in Capri, developed by Bonn University, and Andrea Zimmermann is here. And last week in TradeM we released a new baseline scenario, largely drawing from Capri, that is now available for the economic models. And that is a basis to further compare models. And that is already an improvement. And I think that in the work that we have done in the first year and a half, some attempts are made to further improve models by interaction between CropM and TradeM and LiveM and TradeM. And few are on the 3 Cs. That is already a big achievement. And I think that will be enriched, hopefully in the next couple of years, to go more on the scaling issues. I think many models cover the farm area, which is fully justified. But at the end, you want to see what is happening on the market and see what the market is impacting farm behavior, and vice versa. The impact of the farm level towards the globe. And economists tend to focus on the world and European market down to the farm, but I think that the achievement of macsur in the coming time is also to improve models by upscaling from farm to regional and global level. Having said that, that's about a statement. That is already a conclusion that we have achieved in TradeM. Having said this, the modeling is very much about the supply of food. And I think when we really go into issues like food security, food and nutrition security, we need to better understand the demand for food. Tommy was asking about that as well. And I think macsur also needs to develop further work in understanding the demand. As said, we really started in the inventory, and we had 20 to 25 models. That is all reported in the first year of macsur as a basis for comparison we did in the first year. And now trying to do first attempts on model linkage and model improvements. The 4 themes. The work package 1 is led by Waldemar Bojar, and that is very much about the existing tools, data and models. The work package 2 led by Øyvind Hoveld from Norway about improvements in the models, tools, and integrated assessment approaches. That is doing some first efforts, and we have great expectations that this will really feed into the pilot studies in the next 1 to 2 years, and eventually also supporting work in crop and life M. And then the work packet 3 about the pilot studies. The first studies have started in the past since summer of last year. And Gabriele Dono is leading this work package, and then the capacity building that is led by Katarina Helmi. As said, about the existing tools, data, and models, we currently have provided a revised version of a baseline scenario, and that allows all teams to use exogenous variables on costs, yields, and prices for use in the regional pilot studies. And that's the benefit is that this sort of downscaling work is consistent with other attempts comparing the global models that initiated by ECLIP, where the ECLIP started 2 years ago, I think, in comparing a couple of global initiatives like Magnet, Globion, and the Capri work was part of this analysis. This is an attempt to start the downscaling process from the global and European market down to the farm and regional level. And we do that starting from the Capri model by providing regional data for 2010, 2030, and 2050. And now the available models are able to compare their results with the baseline scenario from a European model from Capri. And this is a way to see what is. We try to develop various steps to see what is the benefit of macsur, and including the working trade end, where you have debated a model to start, and when using the baseline scenario from Capri, already allows to see what is the potential possible improvement in the model. That is a basis to start with examining possibilities for improving models. Then comes the interaction with the other themes that could further improve models and the regional pilots. Work package 2, as said, there are a couple of activities on integrated assessments, and few efforts have been started. And I think one example initiated by MTT in Finland to link the economic and production model in the Finnish case with another model, Magpie from Potsdam. And this is an approach to compare models run at regional and national level compared to European analysis. And in addition, Øyvind Hoveld is initiating work on uncertainty and risks. And during the crop and workshop in Oslo, he developed a wish list from the perspective of economics. And Øyvind in NILF is now preparing work on understanding uncertainty and risk in the context of food security, where the risk is very much about the variance of the preferred outcome of food security relative to unsecure situations. And there might be uncertainty of such situations when there is a sort of variance of the outcome. And here the economic work in macsur could benefit very much in understanding the uncertainty and risk from the perspective of economic models. And I think that would be a great asset to compare this in the uncertainty work in crop and livestock. And as another example, the team in Bonn is also trying to improve the understanding of yield gaps, and I think the group in Bonn is planning to work on quantifying the yield gap, running the farm accountancy data network from Europe, and integrating the knowledge from the crop modeling with the economic analysis available in the Bonn team with the country group. And I think this is a very important example where crop knowledge really adds value to improving the understanding of to what extent there are gaps in the yields that you observe across farms in Europe. When it comes to the pilot studies, there are 3 groups in Work Packet 3 that are contributing to the regional pilot studies, but we would really put an effort in the coming year also to develop work on 2 other topics that we think are essential to perform in macsur. One is to do work on sub-Saharan Africa, and it's not to defend the European forward against work in Africa, but throughout Europe there is a lot of knowledge, a lot of expertise working in either in Western or Eastern Africa, and I think the macsur could be a very important vehicle to integrate the knowledge that is available from the different research groups in Europe, and to better understand and support policy making and decision making in Africa. And here, I think the working together of different teams could really add value to improve the understanding of linking food security, agriculture, and climate change in the context of Africa. That is an issue we have discussed extensively during a workshop that we had last year in Münchberg, but we will plan for that further plan for that in the coming year. In terms of livestock model, I think there will be an essential activity for the macsur to deliver work on linking economic modeling with livestock modeling. I think the pilot studies are very much about adaptation. The mitigation potential has been, I think, not sufficiently covered in the project, and I think that would be an opportunity to compare the various range of options in terms of mitigation, not only by feeding regime, but also the consumer behavior has to be addressed, and that would be quite a challenge if macsur could develop a study on mitigation potential for Europe, examining the possibilities at farm level relative to the regional and European level, and at the end, a possible global analysis as well when possible. And I still come to the link to ACNIP, but I think the macsur will make an effort in the coming year to contribute to developing European representative pathways And I think the further development of work in the pilot studies really require better understanding on linking climate change with the impact of crop production. But here I think the achievements with crop M are quite essential. And I think also in terms of emission reduction pathways, we need to agree on the various policy scenarios. In terms of the coming work, be it either the coming year or the possible extension, I think we need to better understand the link with the climate change and yields and qualities of crops and animals. And of course, many times the importance of farm management practices is mentioned in terms of adaptation and mitigation. And hopefully this week we can also use as a way to better understand management practices to cope with adaptation and mitigation. And eventually, for the coming decades in the economic modeling, you need to understand the yields and production, but also the prices. And as said, the economic modeling has largely a perspective from the top down and using the European and global models and see what their impact is on the farm level. And hopefully this project could add value by using bottom-up approaches. When it comes to the capacity building, led by Katharina Helming, there have been a couple of training sessions, and very recently there was a training session organized in Haifa University last week with the team of Tzadok. And there have been a few GAMS training sessions organized by University of Boden Kultur in Vienna, and a new one is soon to come. In the ACMIP, it is mentioned several times that the crop models are well represented. The trade and economic models are there. They are visible in terms of the global modeling, and I think there is room for further interaction with ACMIP from the economic perspective as well. And later this year we are planning for a workshop in Europe in September, and there we want to make achievements into the European representative agriculture pathways, and we certainly want to work with ACMIP in reaching that stage. In terms of achievements, as I said, there are a couple of data sets available, a couple of courses held. We are about to finish one special issue for the German Journal of Agricultural Economics, but at least two other special issues are coming, and we hope to initiate one later this week, and Frans and I are planning to launch a book for publication with Edward Elderly this week, and we will announce that later and inform you about it. In terms of timeline, we have a couple of events later this year, and we want to have first results of the modeling to improve the skills of the models this week. In August, there is the European Association of Agricultural Economists meeting in Ljubljana. That will have a more European perspective on food security. A month later, in September, then we go to an event organized by Frans Sinebel in Vienna, linked up to a workshop of the Austrian Society of agricultural models. We will have another workshop then end of November in Norway, and then we really want to go into alternative scenarios, and in approximately a year from now, we feel comfortable that we have project results for this phase available. And that is me.
Thank you, Flor. Any questions? Yes.
Thanks, Flor. This is just a comment, there was the information about the economist specialist as a result of the Oslo meeting. There's a response to it.
Okay, yeah.
In the course of this meeting. Tomorrow we will have a presentation on the tomorrow morning at 9:45, is it? And the title is A Crop Modeling Response to the Economist Specialist.
Okay, Richard.
Frank and Richard probably got off the hook, but my question goes to all three of you. I guess one of the things that I'd like to see us achieve here is a greater shared understanding of what we actually mean by integrated modelling. And I think there's a spectrum that we can think about. So at the one end of the spectrum, you can think about there being an all-singing, all-dancing, integrated model, where the policymaker can just press the button and he knows exactly what European agriculture will look like at the end of this period of climate change. And I suppose there's a supplementary question that I'd ask to that one, which would be, if that's what you wanted to achieve, would you start from where we are now, which is 3 separate communities trying to bring and meld their models together, wouldn't you start with a blank sheet of paper and start to build that integrated model from scratch? And then at the other end of my spectrum, from the all-integrated singing, dancing model, press the button on, there's the idea that we actually stay within our own communities and we think about specific questions that we want to actually address. For example, the issues of yield gaps. How do we address that yield gap? How do we deliver the nutritional policy that's necessary to feed the European population in 2050? And we just bring together intelligent people to look at different types of outputs that come from our different modelling communities and think about how we address and come to those sorts of answers. So my question to the three of you is, where do you see it sitting on that spectrum? And I guess these are questions for everybody in the room to think about as we go forward through the conference, because I think this is really crucial to what we put into our submission for an extension for this. Is having a shared view of what that integrated model looks like.
I'm Volker. So I would say that we are somewhere when we would listen to the case studies, like regional pilots, you will see that we are somewhere in the middle. So we had to realize that in the different teams, there were certain crucial things we had to improve. We couldn't start from scratch now and make a super great model, but first we have to do our homework in the teams. And if you then this afternoon see what is already going on, you'll see that is already integration. Of course, there are many gaps still, but it's already happening. Maybe that should have been stressed a little bit more, but after the session this afternoon, you will get it.
Yeah, I think I'd say that obviously it's not supposed to be saying evolution or revolution, but we've got a plant piece of paper or develop from what's already there. And I think that having it's kind of attractive to say you just have all books. So I think actually there's so much diversity that we've spoken about today that you kind of need flexibility of this kind of modular thematic approach, but then you need to find that level at which to work, and that is the challenge, as you say, is to work out
at what level can the different things get together. I think that is what we're working on. But I'd say that that kind of magic wands have one integrated approach is kind of, I think you would lose a lot of diversity of thought and diversity of approach. And I think there are uncertainties associated with climate change, but that diversity is really important to maintain. It's just finding the right system to bring that together and maintain the flexibility. I don't know if that's really an answer.
So perhaps something to add to that. I don't think we will end up with this one integrated assessment model. We already see through working on pilot studies there's a huge diversity, and this diversity I guess we have to accept and learn from it. But there's also a point in your document that refers to an application for an integrated assessment study that is really valuable and visible and meaningful. And that's actually a question to give back to stakeholders, because there are very important and shaping questions for such an application. And that's sometimes where we scientists are hanging a bit in the air and making up questions. And perhaps that meeting can add to that and help shaping those sort of interesting, relevant questions that could be addressed and could guide us also in the second phase.
Just to support the comment of Frank, that I think I've nothing to add to the comments on the models, but I think it would be helpful if we clarify to a wish list of topics that we find relevant to not only from, there will certainly be questions from the scientific point of view we wish to further develop in the coming year and maybe longer time, but also in terms of answering in support for farmers and policymakers. I think that would be quite important if we clarify our mind what are the sort of priority list of 5 to 10 questions that we think macsur is able to cope in the coming year or coming 3 years. And this week would be a superb place to come to such a list.
This is so very right. You have heard there was a wish list of an economist towards macsur and towards modeling in macsur. Now there is a response from the crop science part towards that part. What we really need, I mean, this can be a long debate back and forth, but what we really need from those who are stakeholders in this room, we need a wish list of the stakeholders. We need your response and the dialogue with you, and we should really use, or should take the opportunity of this week here in Sassari to get into a dialogue with you to write down these, Laura has mentioned, 20 questions, maybe some a little less than 20 questions, maybe we end up with 100 questions, and then we look all down to 10 questions. But this dialogue is something which we really need, and even if you have expected a little bit more from the presentations over the last hour in terms of what has been achieved in the 3 themes, it is a starting point, and we now enter the phase to discuss it. First, maybe in a smaller group, we have these poster presentations now upstairs. Yeah, and then over the lunch break, I think we should really take the chance to get this wish list from you, because that was the intention of being here, coming to Sassari, and having and start this dialogue. So welcome all of your wishes as stakeholder wishes for our work in macsur.
Thank you. Just before I let you go to the poster session, 2 quick announcements. The rules for, I've lost my page mark. Basically, rules 2 and 3 have changed. So integrated tools will be in rule 2. And will take place in the library where you have coffee. And now we'll get to the poster presentation. And I always find in conferences the poster presentations often most engaging because they are interactive. The authors are going to be at the posters, and you can go there as scientists, but especially as stakeholders, and actually interact with the posters. With the presenters. So people are there, you can go there, and you've got almost all the time you can go continue into lunch and discuss with the people there. And that what gives me gives other conferences often most feedback as the presenter of the poster, but also as someone who discusses with the author. So I encourage you to go there. The posters are upstairs, they are numbered. And just to make them a little bit more interesting and challenging for you, the posters are numbered starting with number 16. So Massimiliano Bassi will have number 16. And then we got 23 and 12 and posters on page 8 start at number 1. I'm not going to tell you why. Yes. And we have one more quick video clip on stakeholders. While that's coming up, I encourage you for the speed presentation to upload the presentation. Very soon.
Sono ciclici gli eventi climatici, cioè se ricordiamo nel 96-97 c'è stata una grossissima siccità.
I don't know, because it's changing from one year to another.
Le mezze stagioni, quindi primavera e autunno, duravano un po' di più. Adesso invece si passa magari dal caldo quasi torrido di fine luglio, inizio agosto, e poi nel giro di poche settimane si arriva subito a un clima freddo, anche se non tanto freddo.
È sempre più frequente, per esempio, le precipitazioni che si verificano anche nuova frequenza, diciamo, dei periodi che storicamente da noi erano considerati già estate piena, come giugno e luglio.
Però io guardo il cielo. È vero che quando siamo pieni di reticoli in testa piove. E qualcosa sta succedendo. Non c'è un dico, ma qualcosa sta succedendo. Quindi non è la natura che sta cambiando, è qualcuno che la può cambiare.
Praticamente riusciva a fare le intere situazioni anche delle angurie, pomodori, meloni senza piegare.
Forse le mezze stagioni sono molto belle rispetto a proprio il bambino.
This is what people think.
Yeah.
Please register to the pilot section of